My friend Miles came to Ian and I for help. He made 48 offers in 18 months on 48 mobile home parks, yet had closed on 0. 48 sellers with 48 overpriced opportunities yielded 0 traction. For context, our closing rate on LOIs made hovers around 13%. Using our hit rate, Miles should have purchased about 4 or 5 mobile home parks by then. What was holding Miles back? Could it really be overpriced deals? I had Miles pitch me a deal he planned to pass on, as the deal was way overpriced. Miles inputted the numbers into my underwriting engine in Google Sheets, then walked me through his analysis, pitching me the details as if he wanted my investment dollars. Humming along in cruise control, Miles read out the inputs until he came to the cash-on-cash return portion of the analysis. 31% in year 3. Miles paused. His silence deafening. Then, like any good salesman, Miles's attitude perked up. With projected returns at nearly 5 times the purported 7% the stock market doles out, Miles's confidence skyrocketed. "I'm in, Miles. That's a tremendous deal. What's the purchase price?" I asked. "The purchase price is at asking price," Miles replied. Miles! It's at asking price. Yeah, it's a good deal. Miles! I think you need to get on the phone. Miles chuckled and agreed. Miles! I think you have some more phone calls to make. I'm happy to report that since that call, Miles has closed on 2 deals, put at least 2 more under contract, and is absolutely off to the races. That phone call revelation occurred on June 29th of 2020, a mere 5 months ago. Miles is smart, educated. He attended boot camps, took courses, listened to podcasts, and connected with plenty of people within the space. How could all of that education and knowledge result in him missing a deal right in front of his face?
Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
Want to know what's the number one reason why people miss deals? Strategy. People miss deals because of a lack of a crisp, clearly defined strategy. What's the number 2 reason? Underwriting. Plain and simple. As of this recording, we are now nearly 6 months into our mentorship program. We've graduated 7 and have seen enough between the mentorship program and our general networking to understand why so many people struggle to buy deals. And it is not because of prohibitively high prices. That same drawback Miles faced also plagues plenty of other would-be mobile home park owners. Step 1 has to be knowing what mobile home parks push you closer to your personal and career goals. But we've covered strategy formation in my first podcast episode entitled Endgame, as well as the 2-part series, The Case for Different Mobile Home Parks. Step 2 is make sure your underwriting skills enhance, not detract, from your forward momentum. Before we begin, I feel compelled to say that this episode will focus on the essentials only. For you finance nerds out there, this episode won't deep dive into complicated pro forma analysis. In the same vein, I plan on forcing you to rethink how you underwrite, regardless of your skill level, because I have seen far too many people of various skill levels make the same common mistakes. It's tough to strike a healthy balance between analysis paralysis and over-optimism. So let's dive into some common mistakes people of all levels make. Chapter 1. Cap rates. A cap rate, or capitalization rate, is a percentage calculated by dividing the NOI, or net operating income, by the purchase price. This allows you to compare various potential real estate investment opportunities in a more apples-to-apples fashion. Capital expenditures, for example, building a well house, that in theory should be a one-time event rather than annual and recurring, don't get included in the NOI. Neither do things like mortgage interest, depreciation, and a slew of other expenses I see mom and pops and less sophisticated sellers include in the P&Ls. All of those go below the line, so to speak. Simply put, if a property spits out a recurring $1 of NOI and the purchase price sits at $10, well, then you have an in-place 10 cap. The 10 cap, popularized within this space, doesn't exist anymore. National publications put out average cap rates around the low 6% range, a few basis points higher than apartments. Unless you go rural, small, low quality, heavy value add, private utilities, or some combination of those, you'll have to rely on pure luck to hit a true in-place 10 cap. We've been a part of now 16 deals as of this recording. Not one of those was a true in-place 10 cap. However, several of our deals became stabilized 10 caps. What do I mean by that? I mean, once we execute the business plan, the new NOI figure shoots up as revenues increase while expenses decrease. For example, let's look at Miles's deal. The in-place cap rate was about 7%. Worse, the cash-on-cash return, which is simply the dollars you distribute divided by the dollars you invest, was negative 4.7%. How is this possible? Well, this opportunity came with a seller carry option with very little down. A lower down payment means a higher principal balance and thus a higher mortgage installment affecting the cash flow. A higher mortgage payment means less distributable money, so lower cash-on-cash returns. This phenomenon has a name: negative leverage. Had Miles bought this deal cash with no bank debt and assumed no other below-the-line expenses, Miles should plan on distributing about 7% on his invested dollar. All of this to say, the in-place numbers on Miles's deal looked awful. Assuming you believe 10 caps exist and you should only buy them, that box doesn't get checked here. Assuming you're cool with a lower cap rate but want mid-teens or better cash-on-cash returns, then at nearly negative 5% cash-on-cash, that too sounds awful. I don't blame Miles for initially wanting to kick this deal to the curb. It does seem overpriced. I've also left out other key details about executing the business plan. You see, Miles did do a 3-year projection, but he left out a couple key items that help. Chapter 2. Expense ratios. An expense ratio is calculated by dividing the total operating expenses by the gross revenue. Again, operating expenses do not include one-time events, like building new infrastructure. Similarly, non-recurring revenue, like selling off old equipment, isn't included in the NOI since that too is non-recurring. So, let's say your operating expenses are $1 while your gross revenue is $2, then your expense ratio is 50%. People often ask me what's a fair rule of thumb for an expense ratio. Our best performing property, from an expense ratio standpoint, hovers around 26%. We have only one other property below 30%. Both are direct build, city utilities, and sport nearly 100% tenant-owned homes. Our worst performing properties, again, from an expense ratio standpoint, hovers in the mid 40% range with a lot of noise, given we have yet to hit stabilization yet. Our heavy value add properties have sported 100% expense ratios before, meaning we've essentially broken even. Needless to say, it's completely unfair to use a general expense ratio rule of thumb. Park-owned homes, back-due maintenance, insurance issues, waterline leaks, falling trees, evictions, etc. occur sometimes frequently and add significant noise and variability to your P&L. Underwriters want certainty. People in general want rules of thumb. It makes things easy. It makes things quick. However, like Miles experienced, while his rules of thumbs weren't necessarily wrong, they caused him to almost miss a deal. Let me explain through the lens of an expense ratio. For this deal, Miles pegged the expense ratio at 35%. That was roughly $72,000 per year in operating expenses. By year 3, his deal also supported a 35% expense ratio. But Miles mistakenly omitted a crucial detail. The revenues doubled by year 3. Meaning, while he used that 35% rule of thumb, he did not adjust that downwards as his business plan included cost cutting. His year 3 expenses shot up to $104,000. Was Miles really planning on spending an additional $32,000 per year in recurring expenses at stabilization? Of course not. But don't blame Miles. This error occurs frequently. Ian and I have seen this same mistake countless times by people over the years. I believe this stems from overuse of other people's pro forma engines. I believe by using someone else's underwriting file instead of building out your own, this becomes a crutch and affords you the ability to not actually truly learn and understand the numbers. Shortcuts come at a price. Chapter 3: Rent Increases. I frequently hear people call rent increases upside. Please see my mid-month wisdom called "Are Tenant-Owned Homes Actually Riskier Than Park-Owned Homes?" In that episode, I argue that below-market tenant-owned home properties may actually come with an upward limit of rental increases. So your low-effort property turns into an operational nightmare, trying to be ethical with your rent raises while balancing bringing the property to market rents as people abandon their homes, or worse, take your actions to the state's attorney general. Yes, that happened to a friend of ours. The good news is that most tenant-owned home communities that sport below market rents don't have far to go. In Miles's case, the property charged about $100 less than market. Doling out a $100 rent raise day one might result in a call from the state's attorney general. However, the opposite can cause issues as well. Mobile home park residents, in my experience, actually have a pretty good pulse on the market. They'll know what Billy Bob's mobile home park down the road charges. So, in Miles's case, those residents likely knew, at least roughly, that the rent was below market. In his initial underwriting, Miles's rent raises didn't get him to market by year 3. At $35 increases per year, Miles could comfortably get this property to market within 3 years, but his initial pro forma took nearly 5 years to hit today's market. While it may sound like I'm being a bit harsh on Miles here, I'm not. First, I see these errors over and over. And second, he has crushed it ever since making the adjustment. Sometimes a little honesty with yourself can be the difference between stagnation and explosion. In Miles's case, increasing his rent raises to a slightly more aggressive, but not egregious, $35 per year pushed his pro forma to a much more attractive spot. After achieving market rent, Miles could then go $5 to $15 per year, and rent increases from there, matching or slightly beating inflation. Chapter 4. Per pad pricing. Miles's deal at asking price came to about $30,000 per occupied pad. Per the prior year's national average in his geographic area, $30,000 was slightly under market. Selling park-owned homes comes with liability, additional expense, possible licensing requirements, and administrative headaches, not to mention a ton more work. However, this gives you more control. You can welcome in new residents at current market pricing. You can screen incoming tenants rather than rely on the prior owner's efforts. But most importantly, selling park-owned homes can be used to buy down your basis. If you have an all park-owned home community and sell the homes for $10,000 per home, that could bring your basis down from $30,000 a pad to $20,000 a pad. While this doesn't bring down the mobile home park's taxable value or affect your cap rate analysis since those sales are non-recurring, that extra cash can come in handy in a big way. In Miles's case, that extra cash could be used to purchase and bring in 5 mobile homes to infill the vacant pads. Before you get too excited about park-owned homes, check out my episode called TOH versus POH, where I break down the risks, headaches, etc. for the difference between these two, as well as my episode called Selling Park-Owned Homes. Yes, selling off park-owned homes is a whole to-do, and you might want nothing to do with that strategy. In Miles's case, that strategy fits his goals. So while Miles's underwriting yielded a stabilized 31% cash-on-cash return, another big portion should pop off the page too. Should pricing in that area go to $40,000 per pad, Miles will have achieved about a $20,000 per unit appreciation in overall park value, assuming it was a 100% park-owned home, not to mention that the 5 new homes he brings in will raise the value at $40,000 a piece on a per-occupied basis, as those vacant pads are now occupied. Assuming that valuation does reach $40,000 per pad one day, bringing in those 5 homes alone will have added $200,000 to the overall valuation of the park. This appreciation in value cannot be ignored. Even if Miles opts to keep his mobile home park rather than sell, he may one day look to refinance the property. And when he does, this very likely will be at a higher valuation than what he bought the property at, meaning more potential funds could be kicked out to buy more properties. After he closed the property, Miles called me to say, If he can pull off his business plan, he expects this property to be worth $1 million more than what he bought it for. Sure, he will need to work his tail off. He will need to avoid calamities and navigate through all of the risk. But the reward that awaits him in a few short years should be totally successful if he executes. Chapter 5, CapEx. While the upside certainly existed in Miles's deal, let's now talk about the opposite. What could go wrong? Not enough people say this. CapEx is the silent killer of mobile home parks. Infrastructure, moving in new homes, random acts of God like fires, tornadoes, and falling trees all pose serious capital risks to properties. Earlier in 2020, Ian and I had a culvert collapse that cost us $19,000 to repair. We also have lost several homes to fires this year, knock on wood, with no injuries. Stuff happens. Insurance only goes so far. For Miles's deal, bringing in 5 homes will be costly. Should he go used, he will likely spend between $15,000 and $20,000 to purchase, move, install, rehab, and eventually sell each home. That cost gets offset in time with rent-to-own or lease option payments if he can't sell the homes cash. That could take years. But in the short run, selling off the handful of park-owned homes could allow him to come out of pocket less for those incoming homes. Miles allocated $15,000 for closing costs and an additional $25,000 in reserves. Both of those figures negatively affect the cash-on-cash returns, but you don't want to be caught with having too little cash on hand when something happens. So while CapEx doesn't fit into your NOI or cap rate analysis, one must be sure to include them within your pro forma. You need to know if you can execute the business plan without completely crippling your ability to buy more mobile home parks. What would you rather do? Infill a property at $30,000 per home for 10 homes at a capital cost of $300,000? Or would you rather buy another mobile home park with $300,000 down? Yes, in time, you get the $300,000 back as you sell the homes. But again, if opting for a seller carry type situation as incoming residents may not have $30,000 cash, you hold your capital hostage for several years while the new residents pay down their balance. Beyond moving in homes comes the infrastructure piece. Ian and I have a property where we constantly wonder how much we should actually dump into the infrastructure. Short-term fixes have been cheap, but eventually we'll need to drop a ton of cash to permanently fix the issues there. It comes back to this question: where is our capital best placed? Optimizing one property or buying another? This all comes back to strategy. Will one more mobile home park achieve all your goals? If so, invest heavily into it. If not, and you need to buy more, then you really need to consider the risks of tying up your capital, even for just a few short years. Chapter 6, Debt. We could talk debt for hours. Term, amortization, interest rates, down payments, balloon payments, etc. all affect your pro forma and in large ways. Go speak to lenders, local and national, agency and conventional, and understand what the market rates could be for your opportunity and others you'll chase. With standard debt assumptions, you can quickly plug and go, making decisions on the fly, whether to put a deal under contract or thank the person for the opportunity. Brevity and quick decision-making will make you friends in this space. You also need to consider when to place agency debt. With harsh prepayment penalties, why would you lock up a deal long term that could sport heavy upside in a few short years? A lot of agency debt does allow for cash out refinances, but that may be a risk you don't want to take. Opting instead for short-term debt to stabilize a property, then refinance with agency to ensure maximum cash out. Apart from strategic debt, how can we make debt assumptions to not miss on deals? For most of you listening, you shouldn't be missing on deals because of debt. Sure, things like interest-only payments, construction loans, lines of credit, etc. can help you bridge the gap between operating in the red during a turnaround and becoming more profitable once stabilized. But again, even in that scenario, you're really looking more at what's happening in, say, year 3. We really can only guess at what rates and terms will exist then. I want to preface this by saying that my advice here applies more towards smaller players like myself. If you run a $20 million plus syndication or look to place private equity money, your strategy may be heavily influenced by debt terms. Here's what I'm trying to get at with this episode. What debt would stop you from doing a deal right in front of your face? I just struggle to find a reason why. For most of us, if the deal has potential, you'd put the brakes on said deal for debt alone. Unless the debt has a poor. Chapter 7, Debt Coverage Ratio. DCR, or debt coverage ratio, is calculated by dividing the NOI by the yearly debt. If the NOI is $1 and the annual debt is 80 cents, your DCR is 1.25. Lenders can give you all sorts of fancy, eloquent explanations of how they value, what they look for, and how they can help you, but at the end of the day, they all seem to be obsessed with the debt coverage ratio. Most want at least 1.25. So if you can achieve that within a relatively short period of time, you should be able to score debt, especially if you take on recourse debt. If you don't stand a chance to hit 1.25 anytime soon, if ever, during, say, a 3-year hold, then you may struggle to find attractive debt. Miles' deal achieved about a 1.36 DCR in year 3 per hour underwriting. Some of my deals have surpassed a DCR of 2 by the end of year 1, with an in-place below 1. Here's why this is important. Lenders may balk at the deal. Luckily, in Miles' case, he scored seller carry. If the seller didn't offer that, or Miles didn't have the cash to take this deal down on his own, lending may prohibit him from buying this property. Like I covered in my episode, Negotiating Seller Carry, Jordan and I got into detail about how he negotiated seller carry, in part due to a poor DCR. So while a poor DCR may make debt challenging, it may also allow you to present a strong case to score seller carry. Chapter 8, Miscellaneous. I want to reiterate that this episode focuses on essentials. I've left out things like IRR, equity multiplier, and terminal cap rates. So here are just a few more essential considerations. Broker fees. Broker fees should come into consideration if presented with a pocket listing. We have purchased several pocket listings and have had to, as the buyers, pay the broker fee. We are totally cool with that. But one must include that within a quick valuation, as this will affect your returns. vacancy loss. Even on our best performing assets, turnover and vacancies do occur, so be sure not to just assume all your units will pay on time and in full. Park-owned home rent should be considered within your pro formas. I know lenders don't like capping park-owned home rent, but that doesn't mean you don't collect that rent. Make sure you include that in your own internal pro forma while deciding whether or not to buy a park. Utility reimbursements almost never hit 100%. We've experienced as low as 20% and as high as at or over 95%. Just because you submeter doesn't mean you'll bill back around 100% of what the local water company charges you. Again, while I preach against using a rule of thumb, we average between 60% and 90% water collections with an average in the 80% range. Asset management fees and other fees you may pick up along the way, if you own your own property management company like we do, should also be a small consideration. Yeah, that may not affect your investor, as you make that profit, not them, but that may be the difference in you buying a deal or not. We have paid up for deals before to hit economies of scale via asset management fees before. Don't leave it out. I mentioned closing costs and due diligence costs earlier, but this alone should get its own episode. From phase 1 studies to surveys to appraisals to title fees to attorney fees to travel to contractor inspections to bank fees and so on, you'll amass some potentially shockingly large bills. Don't brush that part off. I could go on, but the more deals you underwrite, the less items you'll omit. So if nothing else, get out there and start practicing valuing deals. Over-reliance on other people's underwriting formulas has prevented far too many great would-be entrepreneurs from entering this space. But even skilled underwriters miss deals right in front of their faces because of underwriting. Whether you are more of an operator or more of a finance mind, you really need skills in both to find true diamonds in the rough. Living at La Costa Mobile Home Park allowed Ian and I to learn from the front lines. This heavy operational knowledge, along with keeping accounting in-house, serving as our own bookkeepers, has taught us how the mobile home park engine works. Now, when we pop open the hood, so to speak, of an opportunity, our understanding of the engine and what it could become with a little work allows us to more accurately predict what we can do to set opportunity within a few short years. You've got to develop those skills. And at the same time, like I mentioned earlier, having a crisp, clear strategy allows for more accurate yay or nay decisions. Mobile home park prices will continue to rise in time. If you feel deals outprice you right now, you may never start your mobile home park journey. While I am not advocating for overpaying, I am also not saying I see many scenarios where pricing comes down. So it's probably best to assume if you don't want to play ball now, you may be forever doomed to the sidelines. Deals like Miles's, while on paper seem overpriced, have the potential to become very lucrative opportunities. Opportunities like Miles's require unique strategies and execution plans and will come with different risks. So, with a unique strategy, coupled with a good understanding of how you will operate, can allow you to underwrite in ways that make deals happen. While not without risk, mobile home parks will always present you with opportunities. They may just never feel like no-brainers, and that's okay. Fear is normal, but fear can prohibit forward motion. Find ways into deals, not out of them. And if you need a second opinion, reach out to me. Ian and I are happy to help wherever and if ever we can. Good luck, everyone. Entrepreneurs make mistakes, but with the overwhelming amount of free information out there, you don't have to be doomed to making those same mistakes. You just have to find a consolidated version of the most important information. What if I told you I'll gift you all of my DD mistakes I've made over the years for free? Just leave me a 5-star review, screenshot the review after it goes live, and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, join our Facebook group, Mobile Home Park Mastermind. You'll find hundreds of other mobile home park owners sharing ideas, contractors, and deals. It's free to join, and we would absolutely love having you join us.